Hello, I'm Ann Mullen. I am the Chief Creative Strategy Officer at Meow Wolf. Before we get going with our amazing panelists today, first I want to thank you all for joining us. How many of you guys have heard of Meow Wolf? Keep your hand up if you've been, take it down if you haven't. All right, that's great, that's good. Benji, we get some people in the house that have been to Meow Wolf, all right.
And it shows.
So I'm going to let these, today we are here to do kaleidoscopic world building in a fractured world, and these are some of the most amazing artists working in the immersive space. Meow Wolf may be in the practical world, but we have a great affinity for all styles of world building. So I'm going to let these folks introduce themselves, starting with here to my left.
I'm Jeffrey O'Hallam. I've worked for Ubisoft since 2006. Been a big part of building the Assassin's Creed franchises and wrote a bunch of the games like Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Wrote Far Cry 3 and rebooted that franchise, and then co-created a game called Child of Light and wrote that. And then most recently did a game called Immortals Phoenix Rising.
That's pretty impressive. I'll also say that he has an amazing, having worked a bit with Jeffrey myself, I would say that he has an incredible capacity for range and depth, from humor and beauty, wit, and honestly, historically accurate worlds, because that's what Assassin's Creed requires. Yeah. He's also one of the few, probably the only narrative game writer who has ever won a Writers Guild of Award, right?
No, it's actually, I've been nominated the most of any.
Oh, yay, and you won one.
Yes.
You won one for Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Benji.
Hey, everybody. My name is Benji. I was a wasteoid who paid rent with like 10 other people in a warehouse like in 2008 to throw punk rock shows and art shows, and then it turned into Meow Wolf. We drew the names out of a hat in an exquisite corpse kind of fashion, and it stuck, which is real weird.
I get to work with Benji a lot, which is pretty amazing. He is an amazing artist, and he also, we like to refer to him as the spiritual mascot of Meow Wolf. He opens every all shrimps meeting. We're shrimps, we're not employees. Blessing the egg, so thank you, Benji.
Blessed be the egg.
Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura. I work for Riot Games, and I'm the head of creative, and I'm the head of this team called IP Strategy. So it's, so think about it as like, yes, I'm making sure that all the creative folks and all the people making great creative work are set up to do creative work, but on the IP side, it's thinking about how we want to realize our universe and our characters, not only in games, but around games as well.
So I think this means you completely shape all the secrets of Runeterra, and you hold the future of that world in your hands. That's just super impressive. And you also, I would say, what really impresses me about everybody at League of Legends, yourself included from the few times we've talked, you really put the players, the rioters first. Your capacity to really cultivate the community is unbelievably impressive, and I think that has so much to do with the success of world building. So yay, Laura, yay, Riot. So we are, I want to just break down what we're here to talk about today, which is kaleidoscopic world building. And what do we mean by that? Kaleidoscopic to me means art and storytelling today are increasingly nonlinear, multi-platform, and even multi-dimensional, which really matters if you're from Meow Wolf. We're very multi-dimensional. And fractured world. This is really the way our audience engages with any one of these platforms. It's, I would say there's so many different ways to get there, and there are, our world and our society maybe is even a little fractured, and I just wonder, what does this mean for how you all are creating and leading your teams today? So let's get into some questions. I would start with you, Jeffrey. This is such an interesting moment in media. If any of you have been paying attention, there, and we all are, peak content has totally peaked, and there is, I don't know, though people have made so many things, there's not a lot of room. Well, what kind of room is there for new? And in gaming, we see these remakes, these revivals, these translations to other mediums. We see Disney, the biggest entertainment company in the world, investing in Epic. What does this mean? So if the bet is that storytelling, gaming, XR, MR, and world building are coming together, what's the new frontier in world building? What do you see as what's exciting, or what's got you worried, Jeffrey?
I think the promise of developing into VR is incredibly exciting. The tech may not be quite there yet, but I feel like AI and a bunch of other tools are starting to allow us to create gigantic worlds that people can inhabit. So I feel like that's what we're all driving towards. At the same time, I think, the challenges of the AI ecosystem and basically how you're going to end up paying artists to develop in that space and how art is going to work in that space, what parts are bespoke and designed by people, what parts are designed by computers. And also, if you create a whole world, that's going to be everything. There's not going to be, well, maybe there would be 10 different worlds competing with each other, but at some point, there's enough content to satiate everybody and enough experiences. And so where we go, what world we're building for the future, where we're exploring. I mean, I feel like we're at a final frontier now in some ways, like, the explorers crossing the continent from Europe to the New World and creating stuff in this space and all the messiness of that. Now, our whole planet has been filled with people, and so we're starting to explore other dimensions, basically.
I'm going to ask you, Benji, as an artist, building, creating new dimensions, do you relate to this notion of what Jeff has just offered to us, that there's a new horizon, there's new frontiers?
There is new frontiers. The weirdest thing is that like the frontier is like literally in my way of like working with things and how we do things, like the frontier is literally like what we are already doing, which is like physical reality. It's like, yeah, augmented in certain ways, but there's things that are kind of missing. And like a lot of these things, the ways that we've been building, like all of these panels and all of these things, like the word of the day is AI, like AI, that's the biz, that's like how it's going to do. But there's something that's different. I feel like it works the same as in video games in a lot of ways, where it's like, we create things that you can't. There's no maps, and I'll die on that hill before Meow Wolf ever has like a map or something to do. But I think that there's something really kind of nice about not having agency in a place and having these decisions as you would in a video game and like a non-linear story, but also at the same time having nothing to do. Does that like not having an agency or not having agency to not have something to do is kind of like a strange way to, it like puts you in this like initiatory kind of dreamlike state that's kind of missing. So I think that like reconnecting ourselves to our own actual physical reality with agency, but without like, I'm trying to say like, damn, it's just physical space, but it's like having that agency, but like not anything specifically to do in it is a liberating kind of user experience,
I saw you nodding about something that Benji was saying about
I'm
agency.
sure it was something way in the beginning. I went off with you into
no,
some
that's
other,
fair.
Into some other universe.
Get used to this, dude. This is what it's gonna be like.
Well, he's all about no maps.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
agency.
Yeah, no maps.
And
No
how
maps.
does that sit with your world and your idea of world building and how you deliver for rioters?
Perfectly fine. I mean, we do have to have a map in our game because it's a competitive game, but that's in the game. I think that what's really interesting and what we've been talking about a lot amongst my coworkers and our friends in the industry is, our world, League is a competitive game. It doesn't have any storytelling really in the game. And if you're saying, wait a minute, there's story in the game, it's probably because you played a lot of hours of the game and you became attached to one of the characters who says some things on the Rift, and then you started sort of imagining what their personality was. That is what happened to me. I believe that Oriana has a perfectly formed personality. She says like 5 lines. She has some of the probably the worst BO in the game, but I like it, and that has a lot to do with what I've projected on her over the years. So now, when we start talking about storytelling, what we really are thinking about is like, okay, how do we take these characters that people have started to love so much and project so much onto and start to branch out and tell stories with them, because that's actually what our players want. It's not just doing it for ourselves, it's what we're hearing that they want us to do. And to do that, that means we have to go outside of the game, because the game literally doesn't have those tools. And over the years, we tried things like, okay, we have some short stories, we have some comics, but only our super fans, that's where we get the traction. So the thing that, what we think about the new frontier is, okay, and this could go for any IP, if you love an IP, you want to be able to be in it no matter where you are in your life. You want to be able to have an entry point. And for a competitive game or whatever, that time of your life will actually be, it's going to kind of pass. Like maybe we can all keep playing really competitively for a long time, but people have different stages of their lives. So being able to interact with that world through a passive medium or through an interactive medium that isn't necessarily so high stakes competition, that's what we're thinking about. It's like, if you want us there, if you want that world there, if you want the League world or the Valorant world there, where should we be? And what would those entry points be? But then that brings me to what are we often concerned about, which is if you have multiple entry points, it's no longer linear. So can you still deliver a really meaningful story to folks when it's not linear?
I mean, I think Arcane was a huge moment.
Yes.
In my mind, for League of Legends. Lots of people who don't play games have now seen it. How did your core players, your rioters, the people who you all really serve, how did they connect to that content or not? And did that create opportunity for you, or is it now limiting? Are they happy? They're sad? How are they feeling?
Happy. We made it for them. And when we designed Arcane, we never talked about introducing a new audience. It was never part of the conversation. It was hyper-serving our current audience, and that if other people became interested in our world because of Arcane, that was cool. And that brings us to the other challenge we're facing now. Because if you imagine if somebody comes in through Arcane, and then they try to play League of Legends, right? I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like they've come in through this one door, and so that's our big question to ourselves. Like, as we open these doors and we are considering, hey, where is somebody in their life right now? What are other ways that they can stay connected to these characters in the world that they love? But when we bring in those new people, their League might not have been what they were looking for. So now it's like, well, what does our ecosystem look like in that new world? And if you're wondering if I'm gonna have an answer for you up here, we're actually right in the middle of solving this. So it's like the big question on the table right now that we're all really deep into.
What do you think about that? Like, how do you think about extending the worlds of any of your projects? You've done so many great ones.
I think it's super important right now because we are so saturated with so much content that the only way to engage with things is to try to come at it from multiple mediums. Because otherwise you get drowned in this huge sea of particular mediums. And so as Laura's talking about, if you have something like Arcane that brings people in, that functions almost as a free advertisement for the game and vice versa. So all these things work together to create a much bigger community. And so it's essential in the new media landscape.
So Benji, what do you think is, you guys are at the opposite end. You guys are doing full digital virtual worlds. Meow Wolf has originally been rooted in practical real world experiences.
Yes.
Where do you think it ought to go? Where do you think now? I mean, we have ideas, we're already doing stuff, but I'm just curious, but you as an artist.
It's funny, because what we've been trying to do is, Meow Wolf comes at things from all these different angles and is trying to achieve a lot of the same things that a video game would, but it's like, we've always not been something at the same time we've been something. So it's like, as if you've been to an exhibit and you're like, what was it like? You just got to go is kind of pretty much the universal answer, because there's not really a way to describe it in the sense that like, oh yeah, we're trying to create stories, but it's almost like a lure. So it's like tricking people to go see a contemporary art show that wouldn't, it's like if it's called a contemporary art show, you're gonna be like, nah, I'm not gonna go to that. But if it's like, oh, it's just a weird thing, like you gotta come see this weird shit, or it's, it's like, oh, it's story's a part of it, but it's also like a lure as much as it is just for the experience itself, because although we have like characters and it's like more about that's the difference between like in a physical realm.
Do you think about
well, it's just you are part of that. Like you're actively shaping what it's like while you're in there, So it's like you are as much as part of the story as the characters we're trying to like portray in a way, but it takes you being there and that immersion in it to change that or deliver it, I guess.
Well, and I also think
Yeah.
experiences have vibes associated with them,
Yeah.
which is what Benji was talking about earlier, having to do with, a space where there is no map. That what you're doing now in IP is you're creating, like, it's almost like synesthesia where things have a particular color. And so that overlap happens between them, that you can play something like Alan Wake 2 and watch the new season of True Detective and they have the same color. They feel like they were made together.
Yeah.
And that could have been one brand, that could have been the True Detective game. And so I feel like that's the kind of universes we're developing now, where you want a feeling like you want to go see this strange, wacky space. And in fact, Meow Wolf did a fantastic job. If none of you, I don't know if you've played it, but they did a miniature golf course in VR.
Yeah, with Walkabout Mini Golf. Anybody VR Walkabout Mini Golf?
Cool.
Anyway, there's an amazing course that Meow Wolf
And they perfectly
them.
translated the
Yeah.
feeling of being in one of their exhibits
Numina.
into the virtual space, which is no small feat.
We're not just plugging it, it's awesome. It's like their number 2 played course in VR, and it's the number 1 hard mode, and it's an amazing world.
It's a cool time. It's a good time because you can see things that like we couldn't actually do. That was like one of the best parts about it, is like, oh yeah, some of these creatures that had to be made, but they're like, made out of like, iron, like steel girders, and it's like, well, you can see it flying around, these aspects that are not restricted by physics,
Well, when you start to think about the potential for moving your worlds beyond its current confine, Meow Wolf moving outside of the physical, perhaps your worlds moving into the real world, I think there's some mixed reality happening there. Is that there's a sort of blurring of what is real and not real, and I wonder, is that exciting to you, Laura? What is the potential for that? Are you excited by that, or are you like?
Yes, I'm very excited by that. And when we did, when Arcane was released, we had this thing called the X event, and there were so many things that went on around Arcane, but one of the things we did was that we felt really good about was we did have a live experience. We partnered with Secret Cinema and recreated Zon. And it was, I loved it. By the way, I think it was open for about 4 weeks, and it felt like you were in Zon. It felt like you were in Arcane, and the actors were great. It was just, you could play a game, and it was awesome. The thing that is for us, I would say an opportunity and challenge is that because we are very sensitive to our players, particularly them feeling left out. So oftentimes when we talk about having something like a live event, we have to talk about what the streaming experience is going to be as well, and we have to consider that holistically, because anybody who can't be there in person, which is most of our players, we want to give them some way to at least understand what's happening and feel connected to it. So during the main event, they were able to get an idea of what those spaces felt like. But I think that's one of the things where we have to think about, like, I think that there's so much opportunity in live spaces. It's like, that's where you see right? It's like where you find your community. When I was online, I was all dressed in my Zon outfit. I'm not Team Piltover, I'm Team Zon. I mean, I had like made the whole thing. And right away I looked around for the coworkers who were also dressed up like Zon, because it's another dimension to my coworkers. I want to know, it's like knowing which house you're in, and Harry Potter, it's very important to me. So that is the thing that excites me the most about us figuring out that space and how to realize it. And it's going to have to be realizing it in different places of the world. But we know that when our community comes together, it's such a cup filler. And it's like anything. It just feels good to find your people. You talk about the things that you like. I don't know about the rest of you. It's really hard for me to start a conversation with a stranger. But if I know that we like the same thing, it feels so good. So for us, yes, it's an exciting space. But we can come back to this, because I do want to share something about what I think is the blurring the lines, though, about how we have to be, I think, very thoughtful about how we do it, because sometimes you can blur it. You can blur it so much, and it sounds like it's going to be amazing, but I do think there's some missteps in it.
Ooh, missteps.
Yes, which I'm happy to share, but I've said many words.
Where do you think, tell me if you have thoughts there about blurring reality, fiction and nonfiction, taking some of the worlds you've built, some of the characters you've been a part of designing into mixed reality or this reality? Is that exciting, or you're like, what the hell are you talking about, Anne? That's not
Yeah, I mean,
interesting.
I think there's been all this tinkering and trying to move things between mediums in the past, and I feel like we finally hit on this moment where we're capturing again feelings. You know, that Barbie moving from one space to another space is about capturing that feeling of that like world and delivering it in a different medium. And so with Assassin's Creed, it's about capturing the feeling of being an assassin. And as Laura's talking about what people in that community like, talking about what we like, you know, again, you feel it and you're like, oh, this is what feels good. And you bring that experience to our world. You know, that's what they did with the Mario movie. You know, in the past it was, oh, we can just take these characters and we can create a completely different feeling with the same characters. And that totally fails because it's like someone talking about something they never played. You're like, oh, wait, you're talking about this, but you don't actually know anything about it, and you didn't connect with it at all. And so it's about connection.
And what about you, Benji? I know you really think about you come at everything you do as an artist and expressing something. How does this universe here, what does it say to you about our opportunity or Meow Wolf's opportunity, moving beyond the walls, taking some of what we do out into beyond the exhibitions and moving it into different mediums? Is that exciting to you?
God, the dream in my mind, like a perfect Meow Wolf show in the future would be like a decentralized show, you know, because it's like what we have now, it's like you're coming to this space, even if you've like heard a little bit about it, you're like, oh, I'm going to this space, I've heard a lot about this, like I'm preparing something, but like the hyper Dadaist, surrealist dream would be to have people just like on their commute, they're walking down the street, but then there's like a different dimensional agent that's like summoning them in on the side of the road. It's like these art installations not expected, and having because that same kind of effect, that's like a holy grail, is to just weird out the planet way harder in unexpected ways, you know, because like you can go to these places and they are amazing, but it's like the dream, it is there to weird people out and to make them see things with a new lens, because that's like half the battle of, especially if you don't know what you're going into when you go to these things, you know. It's like we did a fake grocery store, and that was the goal, was to like blur reality. So it wasn't like this is an art installation, it was like the second iteration of Omega Mart, which is now, it has a permanent location in Las Vegas at Area 15, but we did it in this like little like shopping center in Santa Fe in like 2012, and it was real janky. It was like just like milk jugs filled with paint water and stuff, you know, but we really did it up, and it was just like about the weirdness of that, and like people just coming in, and you could see them like walk in and then thinking it was a new grocery store, and then like immediately back up and like turn and walk away, and we were like, hey, what's up? And it's freaking people out in that way, but like messing with them in a good way, so that they question those kinds of things, because we can bring people to do it. And that's the kind of goal of like, you know, like when you're playing in a game, you know, it's like, oh, you're the character, even if it's like you in this world, or you're playing as a character. But it's kind of like trying to get people to cosplay as themselves, you know, in a weird way, where it's like, oh, here, because if you have this kind of moment where it's like you're open to things and your mind is like receptive to things, because it's like,
I love that notion of cosplaying as yourself.
Yeah.
Somebody said to me the great truth of like role-playing games or anything, and I'm curious how you all relate to this, is that people find the fact of themselves in the fiction of the experience. And I'm curious if that resonates with any of you, with what you do.
I was about to say, though, that the three of us, I think, have are connected in what we're making, because we're trying to transform the way that you look at reality.
Yes.
That with Assassins, we always talked about how we want, like when you're walking through Venice, it's like you're looking at the rooftop and thinking, if you climbed up there, you would find a glyph, or you would find that space that's in the game. And that magic of the city itself being recreated one-to-one means that when you come there, you see it through a completely different lens. You see it through this strange history. And then in Laura's case, you know, doing a sport where someone could become a world champion they come into her game and then they become a real world champion in our reality. And so I feel like we're all like, we're trying to remove people into our virtual world and then inject them back into a different reality.
I'd love to hear more about how each of you feel about the intention behind what you create and what you make, and to what degree you feel any responsibility towards that, and why does it matter? I know we had a little pre-talk about how you might feel about some other games and what they're up to, and I'm curious what motivates you in your intention for what is behind any of the work that you do and the worlds that you build.
You know, when I think about, I can take this maybe from more of a personal space. You know, there's always that question, like, are games an escape? Is it where you go to express yourself? And what I've always seen gaming as being, you can actually go and safely sort of try on other people's shoes, and you can try out other ways of being in a very safe space. You know, years ago I had somebody ask me, like, why do you like horror movies? Like, they terrify me. My husband can't even be in the house if I watch one. It's true. And I said, because it's like it's a safe place to face death. Like, you know, it's like it's like, you know, all of us are a little bit afraid of like somebody breaking into the house. It's a safe space to have that played out. Somebody else is suffering, not you. And I think that with games, there's that opportunity as well. It's like, it is a place for self-expression in whatever way that, you know, and some games give you more freedom than others. But I just want to share years ago something that it was so inspiring to me. I'm a huge Dragon Age player. I love those games. And I also I'm that person who hangs out in the forums. I really do. So I was hanging out in the forums, and somebody had started a thread, and they said, you know, who out there is a straight guy that dated Dorian? And Dorian is a gay mage in the game, and he will only date men. And I read this thread, and it was kind of beautiful, because all of these guys were like, some of them sounded they still try to be kind of bro, like, yeah, I swap spit with him. But I thought, like, this is magical. And then somebody at work, you know, he was kind of outed by his friend. It was like, well, you're dating Dorian, right? He's like, I don't know if I want people to know that. And I was like, this is kind of amazing, because there's this thing that I think can be scary, right? It can be scary, and then suddenly you can just do this in the game, and it's completely safe to do it in a game. So when I love games. It is the main thing that I do in my free time. And it's, I wouldn't call myself the most competitive person. I would say it's more of, I go there because I can kind of explore. And of course you can explore the world and you can go on quests, but I think also you learn things about yourself. And I've learned a lot about myself actually playing a game, and sometimes it snuck up on me in very unexpected ways, where suddenly I was putting a character together and I took a step back and I'm like, I think I always wanted to be kind of like Aragorn in his Strider form. As I kept looking at the characters I kept creating, I'm like, what does this mean? Like, did I always want to be, and really, like, what does that mean about myself? So, and I know so many people who can tell you a story about that, something that they learned about themselves when they're playing games. So yes, I think that it's not just a place to explore or to forget about the world. I actually think it's a place where you can find out things about yourself.
Yeah,
safely.
Benji, I heard them I've only been with Meow Wolf about a year and a half, but I heard when you guys first created and opened the House of Eternal Return in Santa Fe, you guys were pretty surprised by the kinds of reactions you were getting. People were like sending you letters and saying things about, I found myself again, or people, I just came out of the exhibition and started crying.
Yeah,
there's. What do you think it is about the experience at Meow Wolf and that exploration and what you've created that does that?
God, it's funny too, because it's like, it's going to work for somebody. That's the like 180 difference between experiences and lenses. Like you were talking about, there's this like safety, you know, this kind of safety of like, in these kinds of moments where your mind is open to things. That's actually some of the most subversive parts of our installations as an art exhibit, because it's not like specifically pushing any sort of agenda, but it's like just the ability of people being able to kind of cosplay, like kind of just be like, well, what am I in this world? What am I in this room? What am I in this? Like, why do I dislike this? Why do I like this? You know, and like just seeing how malleable that is and how like they can change or they can view things through a different lens kind of like undermines the entire like lens that they view reality in in general, you know? It's like even just the kind of shock of something familiar where you're like opening up a fridge and then it turns into like a portal. So it's like, oh, it helps you think like, well, what else can be subverted? Like, why does it stop here? Why isn't it like, why aren't all fridges like this? Why do we have like gray straight up carpeting? Like, I don't know. It's weird. It makes you kind of question things or angles and like kind of expect more.
Well, I think
out
there's
of just
something
aesthetics
about all
or-
of you guys that has driven you to do what you do. And I'm curious, Jeffrey, what might have been an early spark for you that drove you to be somebody crafting video games versus immersive art experiences?
When I was a little kid, I always felt like a game was a friend. You know, that I grew up in Santa Fe, which is a small town, and
Did you guys go to school together?
We did.
How about that?
You can believe it.
But you know, it's very limiting in many ways, and so you know.
But there's also something special about that place.
Yes, but you can feel lonely sometimes, and so. You know, games felt like you could have a conversation with someone who was there with you, and you would come back, you'd be in school and you'd be like, I'm gonna get home to my friend, and you come home and you talk to them again. It has this, like, great books you come to every night and you can become part of that world, and then movies you feel like are alive, but they're very brief, and you don't have that overnight experience where it enters long-term memory and you keep entering that space again and again. And games are this wonderful hybrid where you're inhabiting this living world that works on all your senses way more than a book does. And so I felt like that conversation meant both what Laura's talking about, which is I'm free to express things and to engage in things in a safe space, but at the same time, I'm not there alone. I have this view of the world and of a bigger universe than I would have on my own. And that's a big part of why I make games now too, which is that to me it feels like a dance. You know, the way that, you know, it's like you could be in community theater, but you're acting with Angelina Jolie or Brad Pitt are the best people in the world, but you're engaged in theater and you're also dancing. The movements that you make in a game like Assassin's Creed or Child of Light are so phenomenally beautiful, and you're putting them together, and so you're expressing yourself in a way that would take, you know, years to learn for your own body, and it lets you try that out. So then I could be like, hey, I want to move like Lara Croft. I'm gonna go take exercise classes and dance classes to move like that.
All right, I'm going to ask you guys a question. I think, did anybody here see the Daniels just a little while ago? It's pretty good, right? I think they reworked their whole presentation to make a statement about the possibility of AI, not to have dogma against it, but they did sort of, I think, put a little flair out there for what was this all going to mean for us in terms of our commitment to humanity. And so I'm just going to ask us, AI has had, let's flash forward 10 years, it's had the best possible effect on what each of you is able to create. What does that look like in 10 years for gaming or just for your life? What is the AI propelling and making possible for you?
I mean, for me, it would be building a whole like world where the shopkeeper has a routine that makes sense and goes home every night, and same for, you know, every character that lives in a city, and then I can create bespoke stories with main characters that I write myself on top of that, so that basically you can tell stories in a believable world that has depth. And then you can play around with the rules of that. You know, again, like Benji's been talking about creating rules that don't match our reality in order to see what happens. It's like the people in this town are afraid of something outside the gates that comes out after dark, you know, and they all are terrified of it, but they can't talk about it. And then you see what happens.
And what about for you, Benji? I mean, you work amongst a whole group of artists who Meow Wolf is famous for the incredible craft of what they do, and people are like awestruck by the actual making. Does that mean anything for AI, for you?
Like, I guess AI is good for a laugh, I guess. It's like, it's got, it'd be cool if it did math for me, I guess.
It will. That's covered. Check.
That's what robots are for. I'm railing on AI and wearing a T2 hat. That just dawned on me. I'm not biased. But there is some stuff that I really did love. Like Vince had a panel earlier today, and he was kind of mentioned that
He's one of the co-founders.
I was talking about like how my favorite part of it is, you know, was like the early gen, like the first, like the 2019 era image generation, you know, where it was just kind of like subconscious spew, you know, it's like hands like growing out of hands and these weird partial hornet like shoes, I don't know, spewing out of the side. I was like, that's it. Like that's
The accidental
That's
beauty
actually
of
kind of
AI.
great. And the better it gets, like the less that shows up. And I'm already kind of like over the look. But of course, there's going to be a backlash. There's going to be like a whole, where it's just like, oh, this is, I don't know. I think it's going to just settle out. It's just hyper on everybody's mind right now. It's going to calm down.
What about you, Laura? Just think about it, the best possible thing you can enable
what I think is that the line between creators like myself and like Jeff in the games industry, the sort of like, I guess you say traditional creators, and the fans that create is going to be completely blurred. And that for those of us that are, in the big incumbents, right, we're the big companies, we're going to have to be thinking very seriously about co-creation rather than curation. And I think it's really natural. A lot of us got into the games industry because we really, I really want to craft things for all of you. I love that feeling like you go to work and I think everybody at Riot does, this creator, we love making things. And we always talk about handcrafted and we like putting details in it. It feels really good. And so it's something to give up if you want to start co-creating. But I think the tools are going to be so powerful that it's either going to be people saying, hey, how do we compete when there's just a team of 4 people, which to me is like the kind of catastrophic, like, oh, it's all going to fall apart. I think the beautiful future is that that line gets really blurred because AI is going to allow people to create some of these worlds that they have in their head. Like right now, I was saying this at lunch, is an 11-year-old who is in 2-3 years going to be able to make quite a large game experience. They are going to be playing with those tools right now, and they're going to be able to make something really amazing. And I think figuring out what it looks like when we're creating together and we're leaving more space for creation rather than the pure curation, that is the beautiful future that I see. And I just want to be clear too that I don't mean that means that games like Uncharted go away, where it's very curated. I think that there's a place for many kinds of genres to keep existing. I was never into the idea that the PC is dead. Like this stuff, we should just stop saying these things. It's just that new horizon, I think, is that very blurry line, and us coming together and working together. And I think for those of us that have been in the industry for a long time, we really have to open up to the possibility of letting some of these things go and embracing who the new creators are going to be and their way of creating.
I think co-creation is so important. I think, do you want to speak to anything about that, Benji? I feel like Meow Wolf is always looking to invite people into being a part of the world and co-creating.
That's the goal. I mean, it's trying to, I think about, there's some elements of going into a physical space that, because like the generation and the creation, like you were talking about, it's like that's the dream, is to have people realize, it's like very visible hand of the artist in a lot of these things, like intentionally so. So that has this kind of like psychological subconscious effect of like, hey, I can do that too, right? Like everybody, there's so many people who are like, they have this generalized, like, I'm not creative, I'm not an artist, that's a separate thing. That's like always, and it's not to say that like everybody's an artist, like everybody's not a dentist, but like there's something to that though, where it's like they've shut themselves off to that idea, and like seeing something, even if it's flawed or has this like kind of look like, hey, I could do that, or I could try, or how did they do that? Even thinking about that is like kind of this wave that could send them on this whole other path of actual creation, or be like, I'm gonna learn how to do these kinds of things, or what do I want to actually make? And I think that's pretty cool.
I want to say something to that, Benji, because I so agree with you about, it makes me so sad when people say I'm not creative. It's like, think about yourself when you were 4. Were you creative? Of course you were. It's like, I think we learn to not trust our instincts. We learn to like, just, you have to start doing serious things, right? Like whatever that means. And you really, like, what does that even mean? And so it makes me so sad when people say that. And especially, like, I've done this before with my friends, where it's something as simple as, let's go decorate some cookies together. Look, you actually are quite creative. And you put them in a safe space and they realize they can still create. But I wonder if what I was just talking about, when you were just talking about, if that's one of the other things that AI might open up, is like maybe people will stop thinking, like, maybe if it's easier to play, people will play longer, and then they'll keep playing continuously in life. I mean, I don't know, but maybe that's one of the, so I have to think about that now.
What do you think co-creation is going to open up unique possibilities in your world?
For me, I I prefer to be on the curational side because I think it's kind of like a railroad of consciousness in many ways where there are stops. And I think the curated games are the beginning of that railroad where you, again, you move and you express yourself. Like it's like you're playing a piece of music someone else wrote, but you're playing it with some room for improvisation. And then if you feel, oh, I want to express myself more, then you move more into the Meow Wolf space, and then you move more into the space that Laura's talking about, or something like Minecraft where you're creating. But sometimes you stay, and again, I think this speaks to what Benji was saying about too many choices in some ways. I mean, he was quite saying that. He's saying, no map, but he also was talking about how you need a space where you can just be, and you're not being like, look at me, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this. And I think that's modern life to a large degree now, and it didn't used to be. And so I think it's important to put people into a space where they can just be and experience something and see how it affects them. And that's different than make this. Oh, like here's a bunch of rooms with different kinds of Play-Doh, make something. It's different. And Meow Wolf, I think, does a great job of that, where they have a space that affects you without you having to create anything. And then you have some rooms where maybe you can.
Yeah.
Let's make your industry and what you do better. In just a few words, what's missing in your gaming universe that would change everything if you could make it happen? If that exists, if there's something in the back of your mind you want to share with this room.
I mean, for me personally, it's engaging with surprising spaces and controls that do unexpected things. And there are some indie games like Return of the Obra Dinn that do an incredible job at this, but they're very rare. Before I got into the video game industry, I used to play 1 or 2 games a year that felt to me like candles in the darkness, where I'm like, I feel something here. And then now I play everything because I'm in that space and I'm making big budget games. But these games that put you into a place where you can really, again, you want to explore yourself. And a lot of games feel cold and empty. Like you feel kind of depressed after playing them. And
There seems like a depressing mode in some of our content and our games right now, right?
They're just big to be big, which is sort of what he's talking about. That it's like this game is 100 hours, and it's like, but do I feel anything?
Yes. Well, I think there's a lot, I don't know, maybe I'm mistaken, but there seems to be a lot of nihilism in some of our stories, whether it's the end of everything and the end of humanity and how are we going to exist beyond, and here comes the zombies, here comes the whatever. Is that of this moment, or is it just a fad or a phase? What do you think?
I think there are a lot of people, to the dentist point, who should not be dentists. And so a lot of our modern tools and need to do something, to sell something, has created all of these empty products, experiences. And instead, for me, I'm looking for something like the woods in Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, that you go into this wild wood and you come back and look at life differently because of that experience. And so there are people out there that are old souls that have wisdom to share, and I hope, I'm constantly searching for that. And this is the other thing, is like life, you can be a gladiator, you go into matches, and at some point you're gonna lose and you're gonna die.
Yes.
But you have to keep going into matches or you haven't done anything. Artists are supposed to go out and live a life that is daring and dangerous and bring that wisdom back to people so that then they can experience that and be changed. So games that give real wisdom, where I play something that makes me feel more alive, that's what I wanna make.
I hope you make more and more of those, Jeffrey. We are, by the way, if you guys have the app and have any questions, you can enter it on the app. I haven't done that, but I understand the app has those capabilities. So please, because we're going to leave a little time for questions. Oh, they're already pulling them up. So do you guys want to take some questions? Then I can always throw another question.
Or add to what...
Yeah, you can add.
I was just thinking about how...
Finish it, and then we can go to a question. You go to that.
Just like Assassin's Creed, I was thinking about that, just how okay, yeah, that's the point of the game or whatever, but like half the battle, I watch these like 2-hour-long, ambient YouTube videos of just like somebody walking around the Palace of Versailles circa 1782 or whatever, and it's like, wow, that's the agency of freedom that you're given. It's like, yeah, this is for the purpose, but it's like the freedom and agency of like how you're tweaking that, how you're using it, how you're tweaking, changing this environment to what you want to use it for, just to have that experience, you know?
I'm going to throw this to anybody in the panel, even if they're not game makers, because we have our own sandbox of self-exploration at Meow Wolf. Somebody in the audience has asked if any of you have concerns about the loss of games being a sandbox for self-exploration with the rise of social multiplayer games, and what can we do to combat that? Well, first, should it be combated? Have we lost something, and what can we do about it? Anybody want to take it?
No, I mean, again, to the point that there are
Yeah.
many different kinds of experiences.
Yeah.
You know, the experience that Laura's talking about
Yes.
pure creation versus the experience I'm talking about a curated other world. There should be both.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel the same. I feel like I think that sometimes when there's a new genre rising, everybody thinks the other ones are going to disappear, and they don't. Like,
Yeah.
I know people who play a train sim. The train just goes really slow on the train. I do know these people, and yeah, and I still know people who play games like The Sims, and like the joke I was making earlier about the PC being dead. That didn't make sense to me. I love playing on PC, so I just haven't seen yet this like, and now the genre is dead, and so I think that there's just room when there's a new genre, a new type of play. I just think that's just coming in and being a new genre, and there's a lot of genres, yeah.
Somebody's going to squeeze you for a little bit more information, Laura. Bandletale was a great tone break in the world of League of Legends.
Yeah.
Any insights or early success or learnings on that project?
Yeah, so something about our IP, and I'll just share because it's like, you know, nobody should ever make an IP like this, but then I'm kind of glad we made an IP like this, which is there was no plan when the IP was being built. It was like a new champion was shipping every 2 weeks. So Mark and Brandon were like, I don't know, a rat. I don't know, a little girl with a teddy bear. Like, that's really what happened. A pirate, red hair. And so in the beginning, those characters were just coming out every 2 weeks, and there wasn't a thought yet of turning them into an IP. And then about 11 years ago, they changed that. So what that means is that we have so much breadth in our IP because we had to go back and try to stitch all those characters back together in the world and like try to put them into factions and then try to give some of them, they have no relationships with each other, so we had to give them relationships with each other. And we're still in the process, by the way, of kind of straightening all that out. But what we think is one of the powerful things about, particularly I'm going to say the League IP, is that we can hit a few different tones. So we can go dark, you know, we can have something very serious, then we can do something very lighthearted. And I would say that sometimes I do feel like we can be a little bit in our angsty teenager phase and feel like the only way we're going to be taken seriously is if we do something dark. And I think that with Bandletale, it was no, we can actually do something serious. We can do something that's a game. It's not just like a particular event, and we can lean into that. And it's still going to feel very authentic to our players and feel like it's part of the League IP. So I would say the learning was like, we had a thesis that players would want to have different tonalities. And like right now, as we explore things like as we explored with Bandletale, yes, we do think that our players respond really well to us having those different tonal shifts, and we're going to continue to think about what that looks like from one year to the next.
I'm going to take a question somebody here has asked. I'm going to ask you to do, each one of you, a really as tight an answer as you can, but it's specifically about gaming, but I'm going to make it for everything here, which is what's the fundamental aspect of creating a game, or I would say a real world exploration for you, Benji, that makes people feel something? And that's actually what we're all up to here. Is there an underlying element that controls that? So think for a second, make it really tight, and let's hit it.
I have like 3 words, which is
3 words.
The last question answered that.
Yes. Well, still, I think there's something more specific for Meow Wolf if you want to speak to it, Benji.
God, metaphysics. And like actually being in the space. I don't know, there's some weird thing of like working on these things, building these kind of worlds, you kind of go insane while installing. You have to think in the fictional world that you're creating, you go mad while you're like painting these things, these insane murals in this world while you're being bombarded with media that's fake that you also created. You know, it's like you start living in that world, and like that translates. That's the thing that like translates after it's all said and done to people having that experience. I think that's like metaphysics and just vibes.
Laura.
I think you have to feel something when you're making it.
Yeah.
And you know, one thing that frustrates me a lot is when people say, well, artists are just emotional, as if humans in general are not emotional. Yeah, this happens a lot. Oh, you know, artists, you know what they're like, they're all emotional. It's like, actually, they're very intelligent too. And by the way, I've seen lots of engineers have lots of emotions. They just try to explain, they try to tell you that it's logic, it's a feeling. And I think that it's safer for us to have feelings, by the way. It's like kind of expected of us. Like, go ahead, have feelings, and so we can do that. But I do think it's one of the things that helps you make meaning in your work is you're going inside. You know, if Christian, who is the lead writer on Arcane, he will tell you that he's like, don't ask me to do a comedy. Like, that's not who I am. Like, it's like he's going into a place inside of himself to tell that story. And I think a lot of the folks, probably almost all the folks that are on that team feel the same way. So I think that it's a question for yourself when you're making something. If you want people to feel something, you probably also need to be feeling something. And then that's where we get back to the, like, authentically, like, what do you understand about this moment? Like, what is it that you can tap into in yourself to convey something? And it's really surprising that if you can be true to yourself, how it does connect. You know, maybe people might interpret it a little bit differently, but they felt something because you did.
Savannah here in the audience wants to know if each of you were to extend outside of your current sandboxes. It's a little bit where we started, but what specifically to world build further? What mediums or spaces would you like to see the kinds of creations you do inside of or outside of? Do you want to?
I think the space that I'm in, the reason I'm in it is because I feel that safe space to explore and create there. And so if you moved, it's really cool to live a video game, and that's why VR, I think, is an incredible opportunity. But if it moved into our real world, then it would start to have real stakes, and then I think it would lose what I love about it. And so the closest would be something like Meow Wolf, where you're given permission to, you're in an alternative version of reality that exists in a very specific place.
So what's the sandbox for you, Benji, beyond?
I mean, the biggest restriction, it's like the opposite though, because like the biggest restrictions we have are like, exit signs and and it's like, the laws of physics. Like, you want to see these things. It would be cool to, I mean, I'd love to see those things blur, or like the combination of both of those things. And like, what could that mean to have an actual tactile, real experience that is not subject to the whims of physics?
Well, that's what's so great about Numina and Walkabout Mini Golf. For anybody who wants to experience it, you can actually, Numina is in Convergence Station in Denver, and it's one of 4 worlds that have converged, and it's this beautiful 6-dimensional being of flora and fauna and incredible creatures. But if you go into it, into Walkabout Mini Golf, you can fly through it and move past, and the creatures are alive, and they look at you, and you can hover eye to eye with a massive creature. It's just amazing. So you are defying the physics of that world, and it's intensely awesome, and it's super subversive. You can move through it in a way you couldn't in our real world.
Yeah. Okay.
What about you, Laura? Where do you see League? Where are you going?
Well, this is kind of more like if you were to extend outside of your sandboxes, right?
Yes, that's true.
It's okay. I'll take this one as, if it's okay, a little bit more of a personal one. Probably would be more in the types of spaces that y'all are playing in. There's something about, I just don't really want to grow up. That's what got me into games. There's a point when you're, 12, 13, probably younger now. I grew up in the 70s and 80s where you're not allowed to play anymore, especially as a girl. You're supposed to be like crank calling boys on the phone. It's so boring. And I was really bored growing up. It's so bad. I had to sit still. And so I tend to like, I think like the other sandboxes, like the physical space is such an interesting one because I love video games, but it's all here, it doesn't involve your body. And then being able to go into a live space and you're moving through spaces, it's like, I think it's a different type of fantasy, but it's just back to like, I basically just don't want to grow up. So it's a way that I can still kind of look adult, but I get to play with everybody, right? That's it.
We have an anonymous question. Not that I've been name checking anybody, but just to say, what do you think the decline of media literacy or experiences reflects in today's or future world building?
I think that creation is a language, and when you're on a team, the best that you can do is your lowest common denominator. That basically the literacy of that group collectively hinges on everyone being as literate as possible. So that, because you're creating worlds and spaces that don't exist. And so you have to be like, oh, it's like in the Coen Brothers movie, this Coen Brothers movie meets this, experimental theater piece. And so if everyone on the team hasn't seen that thing, then they can't see what you're seeing. And so I think that's true of the audience too. Yeah. That as media literacy declines and education declines.
Is media literacy declining?
I would argue that education on some level, like this attack on liberal arts education and the idea that we should understand the world in a certain way is being attacked. I think there's a lot of...
It's a whole other panel. It's a completely interesting subject. Well, go. Go.
It creates people who don't question advertisements or what they're told anymore because you don't have the ability to look at that thing and say, what are these people trying to sell me?
Or they don't question what they're being served.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway, I went to a great panel earlier about building ethical worlds in the metaverse. And one of the main focuses was biometric data. And the fact that we would be able to soon, it's not so much the data itself, what you do with the data, that we'll be able to tell based on your eye dilation, Jeffrey, that you're frightened of something or you're aroused by something, and now the machine learning can serve you something that pushes you into one of those directions deliberately. And that kind of thing, being aware of that and asking yourself, like, do we want anybody to be able to serve something back to me based on my data is, I guess, perhaps the media literacy that our anonymous
being human is so
about.
complicated in so many ways because on one hand, there's seeing something like opera, something that you've been trained for over many years to love, and you can feel so alive when you have all that training and you have the media literacy to know what they're commenting on and all this stuff comes together and you have this incredible experience.
The complete art project.
South Park is doing stuff like that too, where you really, when you know what they're talking about and what they're making fun of on many levels, it works. But then there's this primal experience where you're just feeling as a human being the bass from a speaker or something. And both those things can make you feel more alive or less alive. And they're like opposites, so.
Commentary from the panel on what Jeffrey has to say.
The media literacy biz?
Yeah.
I don't know, that's what my question was too, like, is it declining? And I'm wondering, like, I look at like Gen Z, Alpha crew, it's like they're so, I was like, maybe it's so good. It's like not that they're media illiterate, they're just so media literate that they're so jaded to everything that it's just like anything that's coming at you, it's like, oh, automatically, like, I don't want it, automatically shut down. I'm refusing to be literate in it even. And I'm like, that you can actually lose some sort of genuine, like if there's a real genuine thing that you can, you're trying to send out there, it's like, because it's aimed at you or like sent to you, it's like, this kind of rejected thing just inherently because it's a company trying to say something, which I mean, that's fair, but.
Okay, I love this question. I want to answer it, but I won't. I'm going to let you guys answer it. Live design time. If the three of you were to create a mashup, what would it be?
Oh, God.
I love it. We get some champions at the end. We've got open world, move me through art and story, immersive, no agency. And then we have highly designed, amazing games with worlds that invite me to be an assassin. What are we gonna do? Give you a second to think about how these things mash up. Who's got one? Anybody got one?
I know Laura very well, and so I think us as artists, you're talking a lot about the companies that we work for, but it's like, I know that, and based on this conversation too, that we would want to make something that makes you feel incredibly deeply, and then having, hung out with Benji a little bit, maybe it would be a little bit absurd too.
Just kidding. Yeah.
And I think it would have to, I think what would be interesting, why I'm really quiet, because I'm like, I think everything that comes to mind right now is just too trite. It's like the whole, we have a game, and then the game, you go to live space and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I think we'd have to think about something that was gonna be totally off the wall. I mean, I don't know. It's like somebody's gonna walk in a door and they're gonna come out the other side 2 days later, a completely different person, and somewhere in there, they're we'll make sure they get fed somewhere along the line, but it's like something that, that would be transformative, which means that it would be something that would have to make them pretty uncomfortable. And I think that, to me, would be a mixture of, something digital and live, but anyway.
I do know a process, like one point Laura asked me, we have 10 shower curtains, what would they be, go? And I feel like that would be the process maybe we would do, that we come up, we start with something, and then he would be like, oh my God, I love this one, and then we would start going from there.
Exquisite Corpse way would be kind of cool, but, a fusion.
No, I just like that in what you all do, a person gets to die and be reborn and get another shot and get another shot and get another shot. And I think it would be amazing to have, obviously we don't want to die, but it would be interesting to merge that in a IRL experience where you get to risk yourself. You get to risk yourself as something again and again and really feel it viscerally. I don't know what that would be, but I'm ready for it. I'm here for it.
Yeah, I love it when crew goes really hard on just an absurd concept. Like, I was just thinking about, like, what would a Meow Wolf video game even be like, It's like, and one of my favorite...
You have some ideas on that, I think.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Let's hear it.
Do you guys know, like, Katamari Damacy?
Best game ever.
Damn,
So
game
great.
is so sick. Oh, God, it's such a cool idea, and it's so far-fetched, and they've just stuck with it. It's just, I love the idea of seeing abstraction in that way, like, as you would in an exhibit, but bringing that to an actual game or like mechanics where it's like, it's through a lens, it's like some certain angle or idea, but it just goes for it really hard on an absurd concept.
Well, I love how we were actually talking about a mobile game and you were just, everything about your ideas were about subverting the whole notion of rewards. It was just very funny.
I suppose we can all just roll ourselves up in a ball and just see if we can roll up the.
I always wanted to make a game.
Yeah. What did you always want to do, Jeffrey?
I always wanted to make a game where you're offered quests all the time, or to buy like objects at stores, all the like RPG stuff, and then the key to the game is that at some point you just go off into the desert and have a real experience, and then you're like, oh wait, the game was trapping me in this thing that I didn't have to be a part of. I can go and be free.
All right, I'm just going to ask a little professional thing I like sometimes, because I feel like great things come from mistakes. Have any of you ever had an error or a mistake in your career that either was just a horrible mistake and you can amuse everybody here by it, or you really learned from it? It told you something, what to do next time, what to pay attention to. And if you can be specific.
I mean, recently I learned with Immortals Phoenix Rising that making an experience that's kind of a Shrek broad comedy for gamers, that audience is not the same. And so you really have to, the mediums have different audiences and they're not universal, and there are certain profiles to people. Even though I want to deny all of that as an artist,
Yes.
focus tests and stuff like that are important.
All right.
I'm going to share one that I think that there's many of us at Riot share. But I want to share this one because I think it actually will help the audience. We had to learn the hard way that if we wanted to do story, we were going to have to sacrifice things in the game. And we made a really big error where we started getting really excited about story and what story could do. And sorry, I'm getting over something. But didn't really think about how it would impact the game. So if you're telling a story, players have an expectation of continuity and consistency. So if you're saying, sorry, this is going to happen.
Oh,
Let Ben-
Benji, do you want to answer while Laura recovers from her?
I don't make mistakes.
You don't make mistakes.
Just kidding. I don't know. Like,
Well, I think Meow Wolf is about the beauty of mistakes and collision.
It is literally like in both aesthetic and not. I feel like in operating and the way of running with things, we've kind of learned those things, because it's like stuff that we didn't think that we were going to have to even deal with, where it's just, or like the way of running things yielding to.
You opened a business. Maybe that was it.
I mean, that was a big mistake, but like, I think yielding to things for the sake of customer satisfaction was that's been kind of a mistake, and like learning where it's just like, oh, like a small percentage of crew, like they want a map, or they want, like they want to be satisfied in this way, but it's like, I don't get it. And it's like yielding or like making decisions based off of that, where it's like, well, let's make the story more appealing. And like, why don't we just, and so it's like, those are mistakes of like dumbing it down for the sake of palatability, because, it's like, we're kind of relying on people actually going through this transformative experience through those things to actually that's actually better for them. And so it's like, we know this is good for you, even if you're like not satisfied and you want that, you know.
No, one of the great principles of Meow Wolf is that we're not going to give you the meaning. That in fact, the search for meaning is the meaning.
Yeah.
And that's the great power, I think, of Meow Wolf. Lori, are you well enough to answer this? Because I think
I'm
we're
so
at
sorry,
time.
everybody. I've been like this for like 2 weeks.
We're going to give you, you get the last word. Oh, we're at time. So
Yeah.
just
So I
finish
just
it up
wanted
and
to,
we'll go.
I want to make sure I answer it. So when we did, I think if anybody knows about League, we had this like, sort of Ruination event, and we had this Sentinels event. And we were coming at it from like a whole bunch of products, a whole bunch of game stuff. It's going to be fun, fun, fun. Story, story, story. We're going to have story in it. And we made all of our story decisions based on the game products because we're not used to doing story. So what ended up happening was certain characters that should have shown up in the story didn't show up in the story. And it made sense from a, hey, this is what players might, like using our normal metrics and measurements, it made all the sense in the world. Like, it's been a while since this character's had a skin or this character's shown up. But the thing is that for years we've been building up that certain characters would show up in any story that had to do with Shadow Isles, and they didn't show up. And players were so angry at us, so angry. And you know, they called us greedy. They interpret it in a million different ways, but if they could see what's going on under the hood, it's just a complete misunderstanding on our part, included, all of us, that as soon as we start to, we don't have to tell them there's a story, they can feel the fabric of the story forming. If you don't deliver on that, and you say, well, there's these other 10 things that I want to do, it doesn't feel continuous or authentic to the characters, players are going to get really angry. So I think that was like a big takeaway for a lot of us. It's like, if we're going to do story, then we have to commit to it, and that means we have to make trade-offs appropriate to that, and we're going to have to think about developing in the game differently.
So we're going to end there just to say, two different ends of the spectrum, we're not going to please them, and we're going to please them, and somewhere between, I think there's a truth.
It's about listening.
Exactly.
Finding your way through the maze by listening.
Finding our way. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Benji. Really appreciate it. And thank you guys all for coming. Have a great rest of festival.